Taken from the book If You Want to Write by Brenda Ueland. Chapter 1. Everybody is talented, original, and has something important to say. I've been writing a long time and have learned some things, not only from my own long hard work, but from a writing class I had for 3 years. In this class were all kinds of people, prosperous and poor, stenographers, housewives, salesmen, cultivated people, and little servant girls who had never been to high school, timid people, and bold ones, slow and quick ones. This is what I learned, that everybody is talented, original, and has something important to say. And it may comfort you to know that the only people you might suspect of not having talent are those who write very easily, glibly, and without inhibition or pain, skipping gaily through a novel in a week or so. These are the only ones who did not seem to improve much to go forward. You cannot get much out of them. They give up working presently and drop out. But these two were talented underneath. I'm sure of that. It is just that they did not break through the shell of easy glibness to what is true and alive underneath, just as most people must break through a shell of timidity and strain. Everybody is talented because everybody who is human has something to express. Try not expressing anything for 24 hours and see what happens. You will nearly burst. You will want to write a long letter, or draw a picture, or sing, or make a dress, or a garden. Religious men used to go into the wilderness and impose silence on themselves, but it was so that they would talk to God and nobody else. But they expressed something. That is to say, they had thoughts welling up in them, and the thoughts went out to someone, whether silently or aloud. Writing or painting is putting these thoughts on paper. Music is singing them. That is all there is to it. Everybody is original. If he tells the truth, if she speaks from himself, but it must be from his true self and not from the self he thinks he should be. Jennings at Johns Hopkins, who knows more about heredity and genes and chromosomes than any man in the world, says that no individual is exactly like any other individual, that no two identical persons have ever existed. Consequently, if you speak or write from yourself, you cannot help being original. So remember these two things. You are talented and you are original. Be sure of that. I say this because self-trust is one of the very most important things in writing, and I will tell you why later. This creative power and imagination is in everyone, and so is the need to express it, to share it with others. But what happens to it? It is very tender and sensitive. It is usually drummed out of people early in life by criticism. So-called helpful criticism is often the worst kind. By teasing, jeering, rules, prissy teachers, critics, and all those unloving people who forget that the letter killed and the spirit gave life. Sometimes I think of life as a process where everybody is discouraging and taking everyone else down a peg or two. You know how all children have this creative power. You have all seen things like this. The little girls in our family used to give play after play. They wrote the plays themselves. They were very good plays too, interesting, exciting, and funny. They acted in them. They made the costumes themselves, beautiful, effective, historically accurate, contriving them in the most ingenious way out of attic junk and their mother's best dresses. They constructed the stage and theater by carrying chairs, moving the piano, carpentering. They printed the tickets and sold them. They made their own advertising. They drummed up the audience, throwing out a drag set for all the hired girls, dogs, babies, mothers, neighbors within a radius of a mile or so. For what reward? A few pins and pennies. Yet those small 10-year-olds were working with feverish energy and endurance. The production took about 2 days. If they had worked that hard for school, it probably would have killed them. They were working for nothing but fun, for that glorious inner excitement. It was the creative power working in them. It was hard work, but there was no pleasure or excitement like it, and it was something never forgotten. But this joyful, imaginative, impassioned energy dies out of us very young. Why? Because we do not see that it is great and important. Because we let dry obligation take its place. Because we don't respect it in ourselves and keep it alive by using it. And because we don't keep it alive in others by listening to them. For when you come to think of it, the only way to love a person is not, as the stereotyped Christian notion is, to coddle them and bring them soup when they are sick, but by listening to them and seeing and believing in the God, in the poet in them. For by doing this, you keep the God and the poet alive and make it flourish. Here is talking about God with a small letter. How does the creative impulse die in us? The English teacher who wrote fiercely on the margin of your team in blue pencil tried, rewrite, helped to kill it. Critics killed it. Your families are great murderers of the creative impulse, particularly husbands. Older brothers sneer at younger brothers and kill it. There is that American pastime known as kidding, with the result that everyone is ashamed and hangdog about showing the slightest enthusiasm or passion or sincere feeling about anything. But I will tell more about that later. You notice how teachers, critics, parents, and other know-it-alls, when they see you have written something, become at once long-nosed and finicking and go through it gingerly sniffing out the flaws. Aha, a misspelled word, as though Shakespeare could spell. As though spelling, grammar, and what you learn in a book about rhetoric has anything to do with freedom and the imagination. A friend of mine spoke of books that are dedicated like this: to my wife, by whose helpful criticism, blah blah blah, and so on. He said that dedication should really read to my wife. If it had not been for her continual criticism and persistent nagging doubt as to my ability, this book would have appeared in Harper's instead of the Hardware Age. So often I come upon articles written by critics of the highest brow and by other prominent writers deploring the attempts of ordinary people to write. The critics rap us savagely on the head with their thimbles for our nerve. No one but virtuosos should be allowed to do it. The prominent writers sell funny articles about all the utterly crazy, fatuous, amateurish people who think they can write. Well, that is all right, but this is one of the results, that all people who try to write, and all people long to, which is natural and right, become anxious, timid, contracted, become perfectionists, so terribly afraid that they may put something down that is not as good as Shakespeare. And so, no wonder you don't write and put it off month after month, decade after decade. For when you write, if it is to be of any good at all, you must feel free and not anxious. The only good teachers for you are those friends who love you, who think you are interesting or very important or wonderfully funny, whose attitude is tell me more, tell me all you can. I want to understand more about everything you feel and know all the things inside and out of you. Let more come out. And if you have no such friend and you want to write, well then you must imagine one. Yes, I hate orthodox criticism. I don't mean great criticism like that of Matthew Arnold and others, but the usual small, niggling, fuzzy-muzzy criticism which thinks it can improve people by telling them where they are wrong and results only in putting them in straitjackets of hesitancy and self-consciousness and reasoning of all vision and bravery. I hate it not so much on my own account, for I have learned at last not to let it balk me, but I hate it because of the potentially shining, gentle, gifted people of all ages that it snuffs out every year. It is a murderer of talent, and because the most modest, sensitive people are the most talented, having the most imagination and sympathy, these are the very first ones to get killed off. It is the brutal egotists that survive. Of course, in fairness, I must remind you of this, that we writers are the most lily-livered of all craftsmen, We expect more for the most peewee efforts than any other people. A gifted young woman writes a poem. It is rejected. She does not write another perhaps for 2 years, perhaps all her life. Think of the patience and love that a tap dancer, a vaudeville acrobat puts into his work. Think of how many times Chrysler has practiced trills. If you will write as many words as Chrysler has practiced trills, I prophesy that you will win the Nobel Prize in 10 years. But here is an important thing. You must practice not perfunctorily, but with all your intelligence and love, as Chrysler does. A great musician once told me that one should never play a single note without hearing it, feeling that it is true, thinking it beautiful. And so now you will begin to work at your writing. Remember these things. Work with all your intelligence and love. Work freely and rollickingly, as though they were talking to a friend who loves you. Mentally, at least 3 or 4 times a day, thumb your nose at all know-it-alls, jurists, critics, doubters, and so that you will work long hours and not neglect it. I will now prove that it is important for yourself that you do so.